Good afternoon, everybody. Just waiting for everybody to trickle in. A few more still coming into the meeting. Again, just make sure you're muted, please. I don't know that I can do it here, but if you do it there, that would help me out.
Hello.
Hello, everybody. We're just waiting for a few more to join, and we'll start shortly. If everybody can just mute your mics, please, for now.
An increase from last year to this year, or was by pay with the division. And over the 2.5 years he's been here, it's been a 15.
Okay, well, thanks everybody for joining. Looks like the incoming folks have slowed down. I'm co-hosting it and presenting initially here, so I may need to lean on my fellow staffers here at the Saugeen to let in the others, but we'll get into it here with regards to the Conservation Authority's new regulation. I'll share screen and start that process. Mike or Matt, can you guys see the people trying to get into the meeting at all?
I'm only seeing when they're in.
Okay. Well, it certainly has slowed down, so I'll share screen and get going.
Right, so. Other than that, that was.
Okay, do you see a large airplane photo with a title on the screen, Matt?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay, great. Well, thanks everybody for joining us. My name is Eric Downing. I'm the Manager of Environmental Planning and Regulations at Saugeen Conservation. I think I've interacted with many of you, worked with many of you on projects, or just outright work with you. Looking at the roster here attending today, so thanks so much for joining us. Helping me out today with this presentation is Matt Armstrong, the Regulations Coordinator here, as well as Michael Oberly, the Environmental Planning Coordinator, as we delve into the new Conservation Authorities Act and regulation and what it means with regards to those attending today, which is largely planners, um, development staff at municipalities, and also drainage staff. This meeting is being recorded for the purposes of those that can't attend, so that we can share this later with those that weren't able to make it out. The slide deck can be and will be circulated after the meeting. You would have received hopefully an agenda from Janice here to outline our meeting sort of plan here for today. We will be taking questions at the end of our presentation. Hopefully, as we move through the presentation, if you have a question, certainly scratch it down and maybe we deal with it in another slide. But if not, certainly some opportunity for questions at the end of this. Please keep your mics off, and it's up to you whether your cameras are on or not for later. I think that's a lot of the housekeeping we have for here for now. So with regards to what then our topic is for today, that is this new regulation 4124 and the Conservation Authorities Act changes that you've been maybe hearing some things about from either ourselves or some of the other conservation authorities you work with. The prohibited activities, exemptions, and permits regulation, replacing and replaced at this point the development, interference with wetlands, alterations of shorelines and watercourses regulation, which was the last version of our regulation since about 2006. We've put out one press release from our office to this item, 2 communications to municipalities, to clerks that may have come across your desks from your clerk or from your supervisor. We have updated our website and for the most part our mapping with regards to all these changes. So if you do have a method of knowing when to refer things or figuring out when to refer things to the Conservation Authority, we have tried to keep those up to date, so you're not having to learn something here to then take it back and okay, I got to revise this step or that step. We've been trying to keep it as seamless as possible for those trying to navigate this process. So when in doubt, your previous process of when and how you'd send things to us is still probably in place, but you'll be able to take a few notes from this presentation to maybe revise some of that if need be. What we then have is a regulation change that is notable and is significant in a number of measures, but is also very similar. When I've been talking to the press about this, I've called it more of an evolution than a revolution for the folks on the ground that are interacting with this regulation. It's a bit more significant than that from the top-down view of it, whereby it is now a provincial regulation that each CA is administering uniformly, the uniform regulation across all CAs. And though on the ground, though, it really doesn't mean a heck of a lot of difference to the end user, but there certainly will be some changes that you'll see coming up. So without further ado, I'll get into my slide deck. Or not. Go. So yes, as of February 16th, we were notified that this change was going to be happening and would be in place, the new regulation, as of April 1st, 2024. We had in 21 or so heard about some of the details that the new reg was coming. But many of the specific details weren't known until the 16th, specifically around what were the exemptions, what types of proposals are still of interest to conservation authorities, is there changes there? So a really tight timeline, of course, on implementing this from the first notification of it. Fortunately, for each CA, it wasn't our timeline or our consultation timeline, as it wasn't our regulation anymore. So the province obviously drove this and implemented this and had it in place for April 1st. So if there are questions that we're going to get maybe about, oh, why wasn't there more consultation? Ultimately, it is the province that guided and drove this process, and we'll be referring those questions on to our superiors. But at the end of the day, it is, again, more of an evolution than a revolution. So where we did have interest in watercourse work and floodplain work and valleys and shorelines for a need to get SVCA permits before that work occurs, that's more or less still in place. So keep that as sort of your backdrop as you listen to the rest of these slides moving forward. As again, it isn't necessarily starting from zero here. It's building off of what we have been doing for a long time and doing well. In order to appropriately govern and oversee works in and around natural hazards for the most part, and is more so the focus now than natural, environment features. And some of the changes, though, are I got a bit of a, I don't know if you're probably seeing the same as my own face is in the way of what I need to be looking at here, but anyway, there'll be a reoccurring theme in my presentation of what was on the left and what is now on the right. Whether it's legislative changes, whether it's a policy on the left and moving to legislative realities on the right, this will be a reoccurring theme. But in that vein, here are some previous case definitions, and then what does it move to? So in the watercourse, for instance, your definition of a watercourse under the Conservation Authorities Act has changed, whereby it was an identifiable depression in the ground in which a flow of water regularly or continuously occurs. And now in the new legislative regulatory framework, they've added that watercourse is similar in definition, but it needs to have bed and banks or sides to be defined as a watercourse and therefore regulated by the Conservation Authority. So this will obviously have some impacts in our headwater areas whereby there are smaller channels, headwater features that are a bit more minor, that if they don't meet this new definition of a watercourse, obviously, they won't be able to be regulated. There still is no mention in here, as we've heard from the agricultural community or from some drainage contractors, like, hey, this isn't a natural watercourse, why are we here? It still doesn't go as far as to say it has to be a natural watercourse. It is just adding this better bank requirement. It's notable as your headwater features, if there is indeed more difficulty in reviewing and permitting works in and around headwater features, those are the features that can, sort of hold up to 80% of your drainage, of your flood flows ultimately heading downstream. So it is really important, and they are really important still. So we'll still be looking at these closely to understand where we need to be and not be. And hopefully not undermine certainly the downstream impacts, but certainly a change that is notable. Some also, next item is some also changes is the tests of the Conservation Authority's regulation, whereby if the control of flooding, erosion, and dynamic beaches, and it used to be pollution and conservation of land were addressed, that would be a permit application that could be issued. In the test, the regulation changes in what we now see after April 1st. Pollution and conservation of land have been removed, and they've been additional tests actually have been added that we'll talk about later. But definitely a notable change moving forward if you're seeing us review or permit things that you wouldn't have maybe seen us permit prior to April 1st. The biggest the biggest mapping change then is the next item, whereby we have, since 2006, regulated 120 meters from any provincially significant wetland and 30 meters from every other wetland, including the wetland itself. What now is the change as of April 1st is we do not regulate any amount of area beyond 30 meters from any wetland. So in essence, then we've lost 90 meters of regulated area from your standard 30-meter offset from every wetland regulated area. And we'll have some visuals for those in the room that are reaching for that visual understanding, like myself, to sort of describe what that means in a mapping context. It's sort of unfortunate because we certainly do have the science and is backed up in most of the natural, heritage manuals and hazard manuals that anywhere within 400 feet or 120 meters of a wetland or a provincially significant wetland can have impacts on the wetland if the drainage is altered. But ultimately, this is what is our rules now moving forward, and we will and have updated our mapping accordingly. Other areas that have changed, this is actually a bit of an increase in regulated area then is our last line here. So along your Lake Huron shoreline for your Lake Huron municipalities, we have the same regulated areas from wave uprush and slopes where they exist, but where you have dynamic beach areas, we actually have an increase in our jurisdiction in the regulated area. Our regulations since 2006 did not regulate at all past the edge of the dynamic beach hazard. Our regulated area included the dynamic beach hazard, everything lakeside of that, but did not regulate any additional lands beyond the edge of that 30-meter offset from wave uprush, known as dynamic beach hazard. Now in the new regulation, we are required to regulate an additional 15 meters inland from that dynamic beach hazard, and which is adding some regulated area to our jurisdiction. You'll see some of the arithmetic on where that leaves us of the wetlands that have been removed from our regulated area or the area next to them versus our shoreline area. Certainly more wetland area removed than shoreline added. But as many of us would know, especially those of us working along the shoreline, that 15 meters of regulated area added to a highly developed first row cottage, second row cottage situation may bring us a lot more work than the PSW adjustment will lose us. But too early to say. We will see. But I'll move to the next slide then and pass the mic over to Mike Oberly. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Eric. So slide, please. Thanks. Overall, in the SVCA watershed, we're removing about 20,000 acres of approximate screening or approximate regulated area in and around provincially significant wetlands in our jurisdiction. So this image is showing the area of Bell's Lake, provincially significant wetland. This wetland is classified as a swamp, and this area is part in Holland Township, part of Chatsworth, and this is just south of Berkeley, so Provincial Highway 10 is a bit to the north. As you can see in the legend on this image, the hazard land is shown as the yellow highlighted area, and that's showing everything inside of that is the hazard, and that yellow is the edge of the hazard. The PSW, or the provincially significant wetland layer, is the green cross hatching, and you can see that's inside that yellow. And then the screening area that was removed is that orange shaded area. So in this particular instance, quite a big area of where review by the Conservation Authority was needed has been removed. I'll note that in the bottom right-hand side of the screen, that area is still part of the hazard, but not yet part of the PSW. So then that's why that's still in place. So the hazard is all natural hazard features located hopefully inside the hazard that we have mapped, and our screening area, or our buffer, as some people refer to it as, is 30 meters beyond those natural hazard feature edges, so going outwards from those features. So that's with regard to wetlands. Next slide, please, Eric. Another change is along our Lake Huron shoreline. SVCA has regulation mapping based on shoreline flood and erosion hazards. The hazards are the 100-year lake level based on 1987 100-year high water levels, a 15-meter distance outwards or inland for wave uprush, and then the dynamic beach where it exists. Some people refer to it as the sand dune beach. The province added as Eric mentioned, a 15-meter distance inland beyond the dynamic beach. And within our watershed, about half of the shoreline is considered dynamic beach. And that's for our shoreline communities of Township of Huron-Kinloss, Municipality of Kincardine, and Town of Saugeen Shores. On this mapping, the green cross hatching that you see is the area that was added outwards or inland of what we previously regulated. So that adding that 15 meters of new regulated area, especially along the shoreline, high development area because of all the existing cottages and homes that are there. So I added about 100 acres to our approximate regulated area, but a large number of properties because, again, the properties are quite small. Next slide, please, Eric. This slide is showing the regulatory tests for permit approvals. On the left-hand side is what existed before April 1st. So development We could issue a permit if the control of flooding, erosion, dynamic beaches, pollution, or the conservation of lands was not going to be negatively impacted by development. And on the right-hand side is what exists after April 1st. So what's in place right now. So CAs can issue a permit if the development activities and alteration activities where the activity is not likely to have an effect on the control of flooding, erosion, dynamic beaches, or unstable soil or bedrock. For B, create conditions or circumstances that in the event of a natural hazard might jeopardize the health or safety of persons or result in the damage or destruction of property. And so we would be putting our wetlands and the cumulative impact of any impact to wetlands within that category. And then C is other requirements prescribed by the regulations are met. And if those regulations by the province change at all. Next slide, please, Eric. Regulation maps. Previously on the left-hand side, that's what was required by conservation authorities. On the right-hand side, under the new regulation, regulated area maps shall be filed at all CAs at their head office and made available to the public on the authority's website and other means considered advisable by the authority. At least once a year, the authority shall review and update their maps and make updated maps available to the public. For significant updates, stakeholders, municipalities, and public must be notified at least 30 days prior to an authority meeting, and the authority must promptly update the maps. I'd like to note that this is not new to the SVCA, that we have had online mapping of our SVCA approximate regulated area and SVCA approximate screening area online since at least 2015. And the SVCA's mapping layer is also available as a layer on the Bruce County GIS and Grey County GIS mapping websites. And updates to the Bruce County and Grey County mapping websites are made by our GIS staff every 3 months. And on the Saugeen Valley Conservation Authority online mapping, those updates are made every month. So we have been and continue to meet those targets. Next slide, please. Something else that is new, but maybe not new to our conservation authority, is that pre-consultation. So prior to an application submission, the CA and the applicant may engage in the pre-submission and meetings to confirm complete application requirements, which may include project descriptions and plans, property details, plans, maps, and surveys, and any reports needed, and meetings and site visits. The conservation authority must pre-consult if required by the applicant. And again, this occurs most of the time at the SVCA. Landowners or their contractor or agent contacts SVCA, a file is started, an initial file fee is paid, and the file is assigned to a field staff person who reaches out to the landowner or applicant and explaining the process, what's required, and we conduct a site inspection if needed and provide further details. Next slide, please, Eric. This is showing complete application requirements in the new regulation. Applications shall include plans, site plans, and cross sections, proposed uses and statement of the purpose of the project, start and end dates, descriptions and methods of development used, elevations and grading plans and drainage details, and description of proposed fill. We need a landowner authorization, a permit application fee, and other technical information, studies, reports, or plans that might be needed, including information requested during the pre-submission consultation stage. And again, we'd like to note that much of this, of the above requirements to be filled out are already included as required fields in the SVCA permit application form that we've been using prior to April. And that's it for my section. So I will turn things to Matt Armstrong.
Thanks, Mike. Right, so jumping right in here, guys, there's been some changes to our review timelines. On the left-hand side of the table is our former framework, and the right-hand side is the new legislative framework. Biggest differences are for the first item on the left there, where it says 21 days to confirm complete application. That's actually 21 days to confirm complete application requirements. That's after we do our pre-consultation meeting. You'll see that there isn't really a similar entry on the new legislative framework. So while we'll always endeavor to get pre-consultation and the application requirements out, as soon as possible. There really isn't that 21-day requirement anymore. Excuse me. Back to the left-hand side, we used to have 21 days to confirm when an application was complete after we received all the submissions. Pretty similar to the new framework now. 21 days to confirm that application that we received has been complete. And on the left-hand side, we used to have 30 days for a minor application and up to 90 days for a major application to make a decision on whether that application can be issued. Now there is no distinction between minor and major. It's just up to a maximum of 90 days for both. Again, we'll endeavor to do well better than any of those dates, but that's what the legislation now affords us. Next slide. In terms of changes to our permitting process, shrink that so I can see this better. The conditions we attach to an approval now, they have to be specifically related to the tests of our regulation. Whereas before, we used to include some other administrative type conditions, such as please contact us when work is done so we can complete a follow-up inspection. That information will still be included on our letters that we send out attached to the permits. But in terms of what can be attached as a specific condition of approval, has to be directly related to the test of the regulation now. Second item here is administrative reviews. This is regarding the completeness of an application. And formerly, we had this before the entire board of directors to determine whether, when requested by an applicant, whether their application could be deemed complete or not. Now that power has been delegated to the general manager. Other items that have been delegated from the full authority are, for example, 60 months now that staff can issue a permit for in terms of the validity of the period of the permit. Previously, staff only had the power to do this for 24 months or 2 years. But now, under certain circumstances, staff will be able to issue a 5-year permit. In terms of permit extensions, it's now written in legislation that staff need to be notified 60 days before a permit expires of an applicant's intention to extend a permit. We now have to make our permit statistics available publicly annually. I believe we were already providing this information to our umbrella agency, Conservation Ontario, but now there's a provision where we must make some of these stats available publicly. There's now also an appeal mechanism for individuals who wish to appeal the amount that they're being charged for us to complete our review of their application. There's also an ability to appeal a staff's decision not to issue a permit extension. And on the last item here, the minister now has the power to issue their own permits. Needs to be under certain circumstances. The minister needs to be notified of the request, and the purpose of the request and the types of permits that they'll be considering have to meet certain thresholds. For example, it has to be within the provincial interest in order to issue that approval. Next slide. We've always had exemptions to our approvals. They've now been formalized, or at least some of them have, within the new legislation. And Cole's notes included here with the bullets. You can see in section 5 of the regulation for more details on exactly what these have to include. But I'll just go through them really briefly here with you guys. For example, non-habitable accessory structures, buildings, are exempt if they are less than 15 meters squared. There's other conditions attached in terms of where they must also be not located, in this case within a wetland or watercourse. Next item here is the unenclosed detached decks or patios, seasonal or floating docks, installations of certain types of fences, installation, maintenance, repair of tile drains. Big caveat here being if they do not outlet into a watercourse or wetland, and there's only really a few circumstances where that would likely be applicable. The installation maintenance of an offline pond, so not attached to a watercourse, meant for watering livestock. Again, some conditions attached there. Installation of agricultural infield erosion control, Driveway, private lane, or public road maintenance or repair can be exempt under certain conditions. Maintenance or repair of municipal drains in accordance with the DART protocol. So similar to our current process, whereby even if it's a maintenance request, if there's a wetland involved, staff need to issue a permit. That's still the case. So not all DART protocol submissions will be exempt, but quite a few of them should be, and that should expedite our review of those proposals. And the last one here is a new one for us. The reconstruction of an existing non-habitable garage can be exempt under certain conditions. So staff are having fun trying to figure out how to apply these new exemptions and how they will be reflected in the new policies manual that Eric will be referring to in a moment here. Next slide. The penalties that we can levy for contraventions of the Reagan Act have increased. It used to be $10,000 for an individual as a maximum fine. Now that's $50,000. Also, they can be fined an additional $10,000 or up to an additional $10,000 per day that works occur after. Corporation, the fines are even more significant, up to $1 million and up to $200,000 per day. Beyond that, for Section 29 regulation contravention, that's for works or for activities that are happening on lands that SVCA owns, up to $1,000. Obstruction of an officer is up to $10,000. And there's a clause 30.5 that talks about monetary benefit here that we'll just touch on briefly. If convicted, the court may increase the fine levied above to an amount equal to the amount of the monetary benefit that was acquired as a result of the offense. So interesting caveat there. Next slide, please. Regulation staff now have the ability to issue a stop order for violations. This is a tool that we can't use for any minor contravention of the regulation or act, but for the more significant ones. And there are many rules in place for when we can issue these, and they're outlined a bit on the right-hand side here. An officer has to have reasonable grounds. The contravention is or will be an effect, or the person contravening the act is or will be engaging in an activity that will contravene the act, regulations, or conditions of a permit. That activity has to must be likely to cause significant damage. And by issuing the stop order, it must be shown that it's likely to reduce the significant damage. The Act outlines information requirements for the stop order and the service of the order, and the Act provides ability for the individual to request a hearing to the Conservation Authority and further appeal to the minister. Next slide. Okay, my last item here is just administrative changes to how we can designate officers. On the left-hand side, it shows the old approach, and on the right-hand side, the new approach, just changing around some sections within the Act. So probably not super important to the audience today here. Thanks. Next slide.
Thanks, Matt. And yes, while not the most juicy slide you've finished with there, it does highlight sort of the underpinnings of this process and the speed and the number of moving pieces that are associated with this regulation are significant. For instance, the regulatory officers being indeed regulatory officers on April 1st needed an action by the minister that was identified after the notice of the regulation was released on February 16th, and there was quite a panic to get a new class designation system set up for provincial fences officers associated with conservation authorities, as we wouldn't have had any officers as of April 1st, given that the section numbers of the Act change relative to enforcement, etc. And indeed, that's actually been echoed through some of the building code changes that I believe are posted currently or underway currently. Similarly, that other applicable law was referring to old sections of the Act, old components of the Conservation Authority's work that needs to be and is being updated as we speak, and speaks to the speed of this regulation taking hold, and something that I'd be remiss not to mention that we weren't at CAs or indeed any of us to make these changes, given any money to implement any of this stuff, which is unfortunate and challenging, especially with regards to the item in front of us now on the slide that you see, whereby new policy and procedure documents are needed across the board at CAs to be able to accommodate the changes, mechanical changes to the specific references and acts and sections to our work now, as well as the changes to the rules, the tests, the mapping. All of this needs to be updated, but it also is mandated that CA shall develop, get back to my notes here, policy and procedure documents for permit applications, outlining much of what we already talked about today, such as pre-submission consultation, administrative reviews. That's the review of an application to determine if it's complete or not. To outline those timelines for making a decision on permits, and also outline procedures such as, hey, well, it's a floodplain here. There's a shed proposed. What's our policies? Oh, it's a slope here. There's a new house proposed. What's our policies? All these things are covered off with regards to the current regulation in our policies and procedures manual, but all of that is out of date now, obviously, as we have a new reg. There has been some actions at our board to at least connect these new regulations with that policy manual. And if you were to go to our website, you would see that board reference to connect and draw, where in doubt, the new reg, of course, takes precedent, but generally the policies and procedures, until we get new ones, contained in the old manual, will work for the time being, but it obviously puts a lot of stress on us and workload on us to try to update these policies after the fact, unfortunately, because of the feverish pace of this regulations implementation. The last one in 2006, for instance, that we had to implement, we had about 2 years to implement. This we've had about 40 days. So challenges, but ones that we're working at and towards, and do anticipate all in this group really to be circulated a new some new policies and procedures that we'll be circulating and wanting feedback on in the coming months for ultimately catching up, hopefully, with this regulation. And for maybe some takeaways then, as we're wrapping up our slide deck here, and we're almost ready for your questions. Again, the more or less the permitting procedure and the things we have interest in regulating are more or less the same. Mapping has changed slightly, already represented on our online mapping and being handed out to the counties that may be the tool you reach for to understand where we have an interest in regulated areas or not. We're trying to keep it up to date as possible. More or less, though, where we permit things before, we still have interest in those moving forward. The mechanisms, the teeth of it is changing, and certainly the enforcement side of it is a significant change. The reduction of our PSW regulated areas next to the increase in our shoreline regulated area will be definitely an interest to see what the balance of workload is at the end of the day. But we're committed certainly to moving forward with what I would say again is that more of an evolution of the Conservation Authority's regulation versus a revolution. And we'll continue to work with all our valued partners, being many of you in the room here, to of course address issues that come up, and certainly if you see an odd item, if you have an exemption in front of you that you're wondering about, I think certainly in the immediate time here, let's have lots of discussion. When in doubt, refer them over to us, and we'll sort out if there is an exemption that applies. And then when you see enough of those and get the comfort level in that, okay, that one was exempt, maybe we can talk about that those in this meeting. Then understand how and where that's applied, and then can avoid sending them to us outright, because we don't need the work, obviously, and it would be a little bit quicker. So, yeah, I think that covers more or less the topic that I had and we had for you. Again, we can make the slide deck available. I'll stop sharing and get back to a view where I can see if there's any hands going up, any questions coming forward. I think maybe if you just raise your hand in the Zoom function there, I think that's an option. I don't see it, that being said, but we can try that. If you have any questions, now would be the time.
I've got a question for you guys. The stop work orders, that's a new one. I do a lot of site inspections as well. And are you more reactive based, like for those stop work orders? Like if I give you guys a call, I see someone removing wetland, will someone be out there right away? Or is it more of a,
if it changes your list, then great. If it doesn't change your list, then
Sorry, I'm just hearing some feedback there. Do you guys come immediately if you get a call for a violation of, destruction of wetland or removal of some sort of hazard floodplain
If you want to
feature?
put them on the list, I don't have any issue. Yeah. I asked Tanya, I was like,
Thanks for that question, Mike. Matt, did you want to, you got some details on when and how we're supposed to administer that tool?
Yeah, sure. The act and the reg, they don't specify how soon we must respond. It's just a tool for when we do respond, Mike, that gives us some more power to hopefully stop an activity while it's in progress instead of having to, go land information summons and eventually it gets to the person and the work is done. So the idea is that where there's significant damage happening, we would have the ability to issue this stop order and hopefully, halt it until maybe an approval can be issued down the road or not. In terms of our typical approach for dealing with these, we'll respond based on the severity of the report and how valid we think the report is. Certainly we have the capacity to, once we receive a call, to go out and deal with it as soon as possible. And now that we have this this new tool available to us, just this hopefully strengthens, gives us more teeth if we do encounter a situation where there is significant damage happening, and to hopefully get that to stop before it continues.
Sure. Thanks.
Okay, any other questions?
Yeah, I have one about the municipal drain aspect of it. Says in accordance with the DART protocol. So do we need to still send in the normal paperwork and we'll get a response as to whether there's a permit that's needed or not, or how are we doing that?
I can jump in again there, Eric. Hey, George. Yeah. So you would still submit the typical process, but all we're really doing is screening it at that point to see if there's a wetland component. And if there isn't, we'll respond as quickly as we can saying, thanks for notifying us. There is no wetland component. Please proceed. So you won't need to get that same form signed by us or anything. It should be a much quicker review when there is no wetland component involved.
Okay. So I just wanted to make sure we're still sending them in, or how are you being notified? Because I don't want you all of a sudden phoning me and saying, hey, there's some work going on over there. Nobody told me about it. So,
Yeah.
Okay. So we just keep sending them in then. That's good. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, I think with so much of that, thanks, George, for that. There'll be a bit of a learning curve for us all in it, and eventually, if we get the 15th, for some reason, garage reconstruction without habitability, none of us really understand where that exemption came from. We're all kind of looking around the province to see who had that file that went amok with regards to the provincial government. But anyway, if we do have with the building departments, with the planning departments, with the drainage, supers, if we obviously get comfortable with a certain amount of understanding of what some of these exemptions are, and we're clear on our expectations, you're clear on when you're in those situations, then that's opportunity for us to miss out on that one. That's the intent of this thing. So initially, though, I'd certainly say let's work together just to confirm it is as we all assume on this or that, and learn as we go along, just to avoid. Well, I assumed it was exempt, and I let her go, and then you got us calling you, and it's never a fun moment. So we're any agency, so exactly.
I've also got another one. Sorry, guys. The 120-meter setback to the 30-meter regulated setback is a new one as well. I know there's a lot of just blanket holding provisions, such as in Grey Highlands and a few other municipalities, where it says the Conservation Authority should be tagged to remove a holding provision. So should we maybe be also amending those holding provisions so that you only comment when it's within 30 meters of a PSW, or it's more of a chat with the municipality specifically? But yeah, I know your name is on a lot of those holding provisions for comments to basically remove that holding provision. So maybe some adjustments from 120 to 30 meters is appropriate. I'm not sure.
Yeah, whether, as we know, lots of changes of the CA's working around natural heritage features, and now with regards to PSWs as well. certainly, I think it's if we're being drawn out of those areas, yeah, I think that as the municipal documents get updated, I think those will reflect our role as those happen. Yeah, with regards to the file that lands tomorrow, I'm not quite sure. There has been some discussion in the news that, yeah, indeed, well, municipalities are retaining some control in these areas, certainly around the Planning Act realm. Sometimes there's, holding as you specify with regard to site alteration. Unfortunately, it is going to miss in most municipal instances, unless you have the site alteration bylaws, you're going to miss the filling and grading and drainage within that area. That will be below the threshold of development with regards to the Planning Act's definition. But yeah, it's in the interim, there we are. You're Conservation Authority. What do you have to say about this holding being removed 119 meters from a PSW? Probably we would say not much. We don't have much to say anymore. We've really been removed out of that. So therein, you may still want us to check that box for you, but I don't know that we're going to have a lot of constructive feedback in that zone anymore, as we've been really drawn out of it from a number of angles now.
Sure. Thanks.
I'm certainly more used to Teams, but we got another question. Looks like Jake, your video popped up. Is that an indication of a question?
Yeah, sure. I was just curious about that, the change in the regulated area associated with the dynamic beach. Do you have any sense of like updated direction on how the hazard's meant to be reviewed, or do you guys just anticipate just more permits for you to kind of bring the same approach to?
Yeah, thanks for that, Jake. It is picking up an additional regulated area technically next to the hazard. The hazard didn't change, didn't get expanded. It is just expanding in essence, a buffer of our review around a natural hazard, which is quite, frankly, was a decision that our authority made in 06 to not do. Many CAs, as I said, Gray Sauble, I think Sauble to our south, I'm not sure about Maitland. We're already having 15 meters next to the dynamic beach offset as a buffer, as a regulated area, and in some degrees, it's consistent with what else we do on other features in our jurisdiction. Where you have a floodplain, we regulate 15 meters from it. Where you have wetland, we regulate 30 meters from it. When it was our own regulation to decide what to turn on and off, though we did have provincial oversight to confirm what we were doing is correct in 06, we still had some opportunity to turn things on and off. But in this instance, we had between 2006 and April 1st this year, we had not said we had an interest in regulating 15 meters from the dynamic beach hazard. But now here we are told we have to. Is there a lot of value in that? Obviously, I would say we've done all right since 2006 without it. But as is the nature with any of these hazards, if you're doing work really near the hazard and you have a walkout basement, for instance, you excavate down, you can, in essence, bring the hazard into you, from time to time. Dynamic beach is a little bit different. It is a set offset. It's not so much an elevation in every context, but so I would anticipate then it will require more permits from the Conservation Authority for this 15-meter additional area. That being said, there won't be a lot of meat to those permits, a lot of requirements to those permits, because it is this buffer, unless the grading or the addition that it's related to is extending into then the hazard, and then we would have seen it anyway then and had our teeth in it from that perspective. But so it'd probably mean more permits. Like I said, it's a little bit daunting given it's that first row of cottages off of Lake Huron, which is very busy. We gained under 100 acres of regulated area in that area, and we lost 20,000 with the PSWs, but I might assume I'm going to get more work from that 100 acres than I would have lost from the 20,000. It's hard to say. But it is opportunity for us to make sure the work happening near the dynamic beach is appropriate and it isn't aggravating the dynamic beach. So from that perspective, it is a good thing. But the workload side is of interest as well.
Thanks.
Okay, going once, going twice. Well, thank you so much, everybody for joining us, and I hope we brought some more updates for you than you had from just the press releases and the letters we've been releasing. Hopefully helping your day to day. Not a lot of change. I hope we're all sort of seeing and knowing there where and that the Saugeen Valley Conservation Authority has got most of the things you'd reach for in your day-to-day work updated at this junction. Minor details such as the permit applications, the permit themselves, getting some different numbers on them. I don't think you would have been too concerned about those, but we've of course been moving those all along as well, with Mike and Matt working feverishly to get those through. Again, this presentation will be available on video for anybody in your office that might want to view it after the fact. Thanks so much for joining us. And if there are any questions, certainly to myself or Mike or Matt, we'll be ready to get them after the fact. If you're emailing us or calling us, we'll be happy to help. So thanks to Matt and Mike and all of you for joining, and we'll cut off our meeting there. Thanks so much.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.